Okay, I am not feeling good right now. Not feeling good at all. I feel like shit. Feel terrible. Um, and I'm not 100% sure why that is. I guess I don't know whether I mean, texting with my mom here. I kind of got angry at my mom earlier. Because it's just sort of, it's been the same thing since I first started this endeavor. Is that it's like I want to talk to somebody. I'd love to talk to somebody, but um, nobody wants to talk about what I want to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about what I want to talk about. So either I have to like really dial down my intensity so that I'm happy to talk about whatever with people, um, or I have to just not talk with people, which is literally why I started making these live streams because I just talk to myself and listen to myself talking, and it's the only thing that I can do. Um, but talking with my parents is especially frustrating because I mean, hey, they send me money that I live on, and that's great. That's wonderful. Although I would love to make a little argument here about baby boomers versus millennials and how it's, first of all, it's not even that weird if you look at the statistics that a lot of baby boomers are sending their millennial children money because, and that the opportunities available to us are not like worse than they were for baby boomers. They're like so much immeasurably worse. Like they're not even remotely close, not on the same two planets. And they don't get that. Um, but does that even matter? It doesn't matter. My point is just that like when I'm talking to either of my parents and it's like they're sending me money, so I feel like this like normally with people it's like okay, either I can dial down the intensity and just talk to them about whatever, or I can stay intense and not talk to them. But when these people are sending me money, I can't do either because I don't want to dial down the intensity when like they're like, "Come on, make money so that I don't have to send you money anymore." Is a thing. And then at the same time, it's like I also can't not talk to them because they're sending me money. So I can't like it's just like a no win. And then like I was trying to tell her about I literally was listening to my live stream from yesterday and I was saying like I don't know what my plan is for life in terms of like staying here, going to Philippines, going to Japan, um like just even including like trying just giving up on this, trying to get a job, uh whatever, like but it depends on the graphs and like how things are going, like whether or not I feel like there's something I can do with them. That's what matters. That's like, and she's trying to talk to me about everything but that, everything except for that, you know, like, like whether or not I'm going to the Philippines and whether or not those guys are still living in my apartment in Minneapolis and all this. And it's like, okay, well, whether or not I go to the Philippines, it depends on the graphs that I'm trying to tell you about. But, she takes no interest in that. And I can't really blame her because it's not her. It's literally every single person that I've ever tried to talk to ever since I started doing this. Um, which whatever shouldn't really be a problem. But then like I'm also like I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of stuck between like I should talk to humans like a normal human being versus I want to stay focused on this graph thing. But with the graph thing, I like can't even figure it out. Like I don't even know what I'm trying to figure out. Um, and I just can't decide whether like the 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 way to go forward is to push through, just keep pushing, or like to hold off, or like to go for a walk, or like what? I don't know. Something got me like fucked up out of my routine. Um, actually, I know exactly what it is. It's that there's a girl that's like in the kitchen. She's working out of the kitchen, which is great. Like she's lovely, but like to ignore her and say nothing to her makes me feel really bad. But at the same time, like I've gone through this whole like 2 week process to like cultivate this extreme hyper focus on this particular graph thing. And um it takes a lot of like efforts to sustain that. And before it wasn't like there was nobody here. I wasn't talking to anybody. So it didn't matter. But now there's like somebody here that I have to either like be rude to, and it like will kill me inside to do so. It did last night, honestly. Cause she was kind of like trying to chat and I was like, okay, bye. Or, whatever. At the very least I could say I didn't put any effort into sustaining a conversation, getting to know each other, becoming friends or anything like that. You know what I mean? Because I'm trying to get back to work. But it did kill me inside to do that. So anyway, so now I'm like stuck in this place where it's like, oh fuck, like I spent 2 weeks like getting to the state where I'm like even working on this. And then like between that and like the talk with my mom, like I would need to go for like a long walk. I'd like have to restart over the whole fucking process to really like get my brain where it's at. And I'm like not willing to do that. But I'm also not willing to give up. And part of me is kind of like I should do the thing I was thinking of the other day, like which I think of many times I regularly, where it's like I code, but I do it in a way where I'm expecting that I'm going to get interrupted and that I'm okay talking with people. And then that's good because then I'm also like, when I want to do sales, I don't have to like switch out of code mode and switch into sales mode. Like I'm already in interacting with human being mode. Um, by which I mean bring my computer down there and have a freaking coworker, basically. Uh, which I was thinking of doing the other day. But anyway, so I'm just sort of stuck between two states, and I'm not going to be happy with either one of them. I mean, I'd be happy. What I really need to do is just figure out what I'm doing with these graphs. But I can tell you that unless I'm like really thinking clearly, I'm not going to figure it out. Also, it's cold outside, which I hate to complain about because obviously it's not cold compared to Minneapolis, but it's cold compared to what you expect from Taiwan. Anyways, um, so I just feel the need to go through these files that I'm looking at. and I don't know what I'm gonna do with them exactly. It seems like there should be like a kind of obvious answer to that question. Okay, so first of all, there's the parser JSON 2. Now this it scrapes all of the it scrapes JSON from each page of the website of the URL that I give it, and then it combines all that into one graph. Now this is the thing that has all the other files included in it, although I unincluded them for the most part. But in theory, the point of that is so that all of the things scraped up by all of the scrapers are then combined together by the JSON LD2. Um, and you know what? I was gonna skip over to something else and then I'm gonna come back to that. Um, which basically the thing is like, in order to evaluate whether these files are working well or not, I have to determine um, what is the point of the graph? What am I making the graph for? Now, I kind of, but at the same time, um, some of these files just kind of suck. For example, okay, so there's the about contact services multi. Now, this just straight up doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work, there's actually it doesn't work in three different ways. But it's funny because it was the one I was relying on the most in many ways at some point. I don't remember when. Um, so the first problem is that, so this is meant to be the one when they don't use WordPress. When they don't use WordPress, we can't use the WordPress API, so we use this. Um, Now it guesses at URLs. And so it's just stupid. That's just fucking stupid. Shouldn't guess about URLs. What it should do is utilize this restaurant scraper file, which is called restaurant scraper. It doesn't have to be used on a restaurant, but I started using it on restaurants because restaurants don't use WordPress. So it was another one. But what the restaurant scraper does is it just grabs the URLs from the main homepage. And then it should contact each of those URLs one by one. So that is a better way of going about it than just like guessing at URLs. However, uh, both of them have the problem that when you try to use multi-curl on one website, you try to grab all of its URLs at the same time, then it's gonna shut you down. That website is gonna have a security module that shuts you down, scraping nothing. So then I have to use the one that's not multi. But again, instead of guessing at URL names, it should just scrape them. And then I have the WP All Pages Content Multi, which let's just take a look at what was the outcome of that one. Okay, so this is the output of the about contact services not multi. So it goes through each page one by one instead of trying to grab them all at the same time. And as you can see, we have got a shit ton of short code. I think that the parser, the overall, the combiner file, I should say, that's what I should do. I should just rename that combiner. Or honestly, what I should do is separate the calling of all the other files the scraping of the JSONs and then the combining. I should separate it out. You know, um, I was super semi hoping to avoid going into this whole this whole thing. I mean, no, I was like, this is so bad. I'm so bad at talking right now. I'm just thinking clearly. Um, but I'm struggling through. I'm gonna struggle through. So yeah, like this has come up multi times where I kind of want to review like where the fuck was my head at when I made these files in the first place? Like something about like, if I review like how these files came to be, it might shed some light on what I need to do with them now, which is the key thing here is that I feel like I need to do something with these files and I don't know what. I don't even know what I'm doing, which brings it back to like the why. Why am I using these files to make graphs? What is the point of the graphs? That should answer the question. But anyways, so where was my head at when I made these files? Let's review. I don't know what I have to say about that. Um, I think like the first I like basically I started out like testing each step of the way. I would do a little thing and then test it, do a little thing and then test it. And then at some point I either got high, I think I just got high, or like I just got burnt out or both. And then I just relied on ChatGPT to like make a whole entire file without testing it step by step. And then I glued together like 3 or 4 of those files. And ultimately it worked. It kind of worked for my purposes. But like because I didn't actually understand how each piece worked, I wasn't able to like with a great deal of control edit and rearrange the pieces in the way that I would want to otherwise. And so now I'm stuck with these sort of like big clunky chunks of code where if I wanted to I would have to like, take a file and split it up into 3 chunks and then take chunk 1 and put it over in this file and chunk 2 delete and then chunk you know what I mean? Like instead of just like rearranging how these files work, I have to actually like split the files up into smaller chunks. And so it's just I'm reluctant to do that. And that's kind of what the whole point of this here is to like to break the whole process. This whole process, this 5-step process, break it down into its component parts. And this is what the process consists of basically right now. Again, is that it grabs all of the. Should I write this down? Should I just say it out loud and then have Gemini write it down? It grabs all of the JSON that's already on the page. It gets all the content via WordPress JSON. Oh, right. And that's the other thing that I ran into here with the WordPress, which I think was what I was just about to. Okay, here it is. So this is the WordPress all pages content. So for starters, I have a like a character limit, but I think it's just skipping the whole page when it hits the character limit. If it realizes that a page is too much for the character limit, it will just skip that page entirely, which is not what should be done here. What should be done here is that um, when it hits the limit, well, for starters, it should honestly like have some intelligent determination as to whether or not this page is even necessary. But when it hits the limit, it should take the first 9,000 characters instead of skipping the page entirely. skipping the page entirely is crazy. But again, using these files, like I did come up with like usable graphs. So it was sort of like it was always just a question like, do I really want to spend a whole bunch of time like digging into these files and like tweaking them and like when A, I don't even know what the point of these graphs necessarily is. B, they tend to be like good enough for my purposes when I was using them to make demos. And C, the demos, I'm not even getting responses from the person. So they certainly don't know. They're not like, I used the demo, but then I realized it wasn't good enough. And then I dug into the internals and it turns out that it's because the graph that it's based on sucks. And it's like, no, nobody's even using the demo. So they're not, that's not an issue. Um, so it's sort of like, do I really want to spend a bunch of time like optimizing this whole process when I'm not even sure that the process is worth doing? And then I'm not sure it's worth creating. Why do I have no connection? I should have a connection. Because I was attempting to tell my mom about this whole like the whole like fully automated review bot SaaS idea. And she was like, not really. And she was like, okay, so are those guys still living in your this is my voice of my mom. Are they still living in your apartment? And it's not my apartment anymore. It doesn't fucking matter if they're living there or not. That is between the property company and those guys. That does nothing to do with me anymore. Um, but it's like, no, I'm trying to tell you about this thing. And then she's like, okay, I got it. Like it's optimized. Like it's streamlined. And it's like, no, it's not. I don't even have an API key. I don't have an API key. It's not working at all, period. And it's like it'd be nice to just be able to tell somebody what the plan is and for them to actually like have a reasonable, informed input, opinion on it. What was I thinking about? Okay, so anyway, so this one is like skipping. It'd be really nice to have some water right now. I just realized if I had water, that would be amazing because I am like thirsty, but I only have coffee. I need water. Um, yeah, holy shit, it would be so nice just to have like somebody, anybody that would work with me on any of this. But again, I really do feel like these graphs are the key in that I'm really close to like cracking them open. So I feel like I just got to keep on struggling through here, right? Uh, I don't know, because every other time in my life when I'm like just keep struggling through, it's always the wrong answer. The right answer is always like solve the problem, like think it through clearly. But anyways, that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now in this video. Is think through it. But I need water. I think I could just drink the tap water. Actually, I don't know why I haven't done that at all. I'm so stupid. Okay. So as you can see, a JSON block was created here, and it created a service. Oh, that's the other thing. Um, the other component of this. Man, this is going to be a rough video on the rewatch. The prompt. Okay. So here are the components that we have, basically. We have, let's say, okay, we have the framework. I'm going to call it the framework. That's doesn't make any. It's a terrible word for it, but that's what popped into my head, and that's what I can't think of anything better. But by the framework, I mean the file that includes the other files. Okay, and then we have the combiner, which is that it takes all of the JSON objects and turns them into one JSON graph. And then what we have is the um, uh, let's just say the WordPress API scraper, which should scrapes all content, and turns it into JSON objects. It also turns it into a JSON graph, but ultimately there's only one graph. They all get combined by the combiner. Okay. So now we have the restaurant scraper, is what it's called. But honestly, I should not call it that. It does it okay. The URL scraper, the homepage URL scraper. That's what it should be called. Is the homepage URL scraper. I'm tempted to just start like a whole new, just start from scratch and rebuild this whole thing. Um, and so the WordPress scraper is for if they have WordPress, but if they don't have WordPress, then we can use the restaurant scraper. But since I was too lazy to create like a check, I was too lazy to just check, is this a WordPress website or not? And if so, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if saying I was too lazy to do it is the right way to say it, because really what the issue is that sometimes even when it is a WordPress site, the WordPress content doesn't come out well. Trying to access all the content through the WordPress um, API doesn't go well, and you get very little content. And so then it's better to do the other way, which is you go to the homepage, you scrape all the navigational URLs, you go to each URL one by one, and scrape the HTML content, and then take the HTML content and you turn that into JSON objects or a JSON graph. So, in theory, it should check, is it a WordPress site? If yes, run the WordPress scraper. If the result is good, then be done. Uh, and if the result is bad, then run this homepage URL scraper and scrape each URL individually. That's the way it should work. But obviously, it's a lot easier to just be like, just run them both every single time. So that's what I did. And then we have the prompt, which creates the graphs. So that is its own thing, which, right? Okay. So to review, I should really put these in a different order. So there's like the file that includes all the other files. And honestly, this is where the if then logic should live. Like if we got good results from the WordPress, blah blah blah. And honestly, there's a lot in this file that I should maybe. I mean, let me see what is all in this file. Um, there's a lot, as I said. Well, you know what? And honestly, like a lot of the what is going on in this file, I moved the functions into a function file, so it's not even in the file. But this is like the framework file. So like the actual functions that do the actual combining are now in the. Oh, you know what? And I kind of forgot. Well, two things. There's a chunk of code. It's not a file of itself, but there's a chunk of code that saves the JSON graph to a directory, which is relevant because, like, for starters, does it append or does it overwrite or does it create a new one? These are all three different options. And right now, what it does is it overwrites basically. Or, yeah, and then it's also like, do you have that chunk of code in each of these files so that you can use them separately, or do you have that chunk of code in just the framework file? Um, or do you take that chunk of code and put it in a function and then use it if then logic to determine whether to run it or not for each of these? In other words, if this file is being called by the parent file, by the framework file, then it shouldn't run that code because that code will be run by the framework file in the end. But if that file is not run, is if it's being run, if this file is being run independently, then it should run that chunk of code, right? Okay. Now, what is the last one I have here? The prompt. Okay, and then there's the file that adds the graph to the vector database, which well, also if I'm gonna automate the creation of directories, then the chunk of code that saves the JSON graph to a directory, it needs to be smarter in terms of it needs to know which directory it's saving the thing to. Um, it can't just dump everyone into the JSON directory. And then secondly, adding to the vector database again, that needs to be determined which vector database are we adding it to. If you want to be able to create directories very quickly, you need to be able to adjust these two variables quickly without having to like go edit core files. Um, now, damn, that is a dirty, dirty coin. Um, So again, there's like the file that calls all these other files, which um, which I have actually gone back and forth between that file being a PHP file versus the idea of that file being a JavaScript file. Because if I make file that calls all the other files a JavaScript file, then what I could do is make it so that the user through a UI has control over which of these files get called and in what order. You could have a button that calls all of them, or a button that calls each of them individually, or a button that calls all of them, or a button that calls all of them for all of the URLs. So I could make that a JavaScript file, basically. Um, and basically the whole point, the whole architecture of this whole thing was just based on what was the easiest at every step, and it in no way reflects like what would make sense now that all of the pieces are done, like in terms of rearranging the pieces, so that yeah, it doesn't make sense like that at all. Anyways, okay, so I've been saying anyways a lot. Now it's bothering me when I listen back to these videos. Every time I say anyways, it bugs the shit out of me. Anyways, so there's the file that calls all the other files. Then there is the combiner that combines everything into a graph, which I should actually talk about last. But right now, these two files are actually the same file. Oh, right. And I was actually going through that file and seeing what else it does. But then I realized that everything else it does is kind of hidden in a functions file. But one of the things that the functions file does is like the merging of the graphs. And the merging of the graphs is, by the way, I didn't even realize I had this file, but it does pull up my latest playlist from my YouTube account, and it pulls up each individual. It does a great job of pulling up each video and the description of each video, and it could very easily be turned into an automated like um, blogger, I guess. Anyways, that's an aside. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this functions file and see what sort of functions I got going on here. Also, when did I do all this stuff? The functions was last edited on October 26th. Most of the stuff is from October of 25. Okay. So 4 months ago. It's enough time to like, it's not so much time that I don't know, it's enough time to lose track of what you were supposed to remember. Oh, okay. Anyway, so, well, that's right. And I forgot it doesn't actually scrape the blog posts at all. I just had a French toast. I thought it'd be like mainland style when the way they make French toast in mainland. It wasn't. It was really good. Okay, is this my functions page? This is my functions page. So there's a function that turns HTML into text, and it like tries to strip out all like all like code. There's a function called echo block. I know it. Okay, so that's why uh, when go ahead and do a var dump or I echo the input before it gets moved on to the next step, there's these giant lines at the beginning and the end of a chunk, and it tells you what page it is. Um, so that's because of this function here in the file. Now there's a function called make block, which honestly kind of seems like it does the exact same thing. I am not sure what the difference is here. I think it's honestly just that I've made the various scrapers at different points in time, and they didn't have the same words in them. So instead of making them the same, I just made multiple functions that do the exact same thing, but just started called something different. Okay, so there's a function that takes the string and turns it into valid or I guess it just checks whether it's UTF-H because I was getting a lot of garbage input. I think is mostly images, and there's a function that removes shortcodes. And then there's a function I just, for the sake of like the CURL calls, I just pulled out all of the CRL headings uh, settings so that so that it will. What was I saying? Right, it's just so that it's not so that the file is less bloated instead of having the same stuff. Like it's really long chunk that's all over the place. It's like it would have to be posted like 20 different times, but instead there's just one line that calls this function. There's a fetch JSON function. There's a fetch HTML function. Uh, looks like there's a separate CURL headings function that is just, again, it's just the same thing, but by a different name. There's a function called multi-get bodies, which I guess is okay. I guess that's if I'm using multi-curl, it'll get the body of multiple pages at the same time is the idea. And then there's a function which uses multi-get JSON and multi-get bodies. Okay, and then we have all of our JSON merging functions. Collect drop IDs. What is the drop ID? Right. What? What does this do? I guess, because I think I got rid of, so I get rid of the IDs. For whatever reason, I didn't want IDs in there. I think because it wouldn't validate on schema.org if I had IDs. And then secondly, I get rid of all the breadcrumbs. I didn't want the breadcrumbs in there. Entirely. I think I got rid of all the image objects as well. And then it's supposed to go through the IDs and make sure that each of the IDs it only appears once, or else it'll merge where there's multiple IDs that are the same. Array, union, unique. Yeah, again, I think that's what it's supposed to check. So there's a lot of, I mean, I went through and each of these functions that I'm discussing are things that I looked at the output and I had a conversation with ChatGPT about whether the output was what we're looking for or not. And then we created a function that made the output more along the lines of what we were looking for. But whether or not it really works the way it's intended to is an open question. It was open at the time, and now even more so because I don't really remember a lot of this stuff. Ensure reference stubs. I don't know what the hell that means. Collect nodes from value. Also don't know what that means. Index and dereference. Build merged graph, which just like which utilizes like all of those functions that I just discussed, that I just mentioned. Uh, okay. So yeah. So there's a whole bunch of functions that are being used by the framework file to do the combining of the graphs, really. Okay, so let's start over. So there's the functions that come. Well, I guess actually, yeah, mostly functions is right here. There's the framework that calls all the individual scrapers, and that calls the combiner when the combiner uses all the functions in the functions file, and it turns all of that. It turns everything into one JSON graph, and then it saves the JSON graph to my server, and then it uploads it to the vector database. Now, the scrapers that are being called include the WordPress API scraper, which gets all content from WordPress pages. It uses the JSON uh, API. However, sometimes I'm trying to scrape a website which is not a WordPress website. Sometimes, even though it's a WordPress website, it doesn't work. It doesn't come out very well, or like the API usage is blocked, or something like that. So, in these cases, what should happen is that I use the restaurant scraper, which should be called the homepage URL scraper. It just gets the navigation. And then uh, it should go through those one by one and scrape the content. All of the content is being run through. And by the way, this is happening multiple times. Like for each scraper, it's getting sent to the OpenAI API to create a JSON object. And then all those objects are being combined in the end. So it might be better to just have all of the content go to the API one time. Uh, and maybe then we don't have to rely even at all. I could just rely none at all on the combiner. It's like combining, it's like identifying places where things are like have the same ID, and identifying things that are like hanging fragments of previous objects and then combining them into new objects. Stuff like honestly, I could just have AI do all of that as opposed to utilizing a combiner thing. But I think the reason I didn't do that is, I mean, first of all, I'm using 4.0 mini, and the larger the amount you give to it, the more it messes up. And like I just wasn't very happy with the outputs it was giving me. So I would rather give it- give use multiple instances of giving the AI small chunks of JSON and having it, or small chunks of content and having it return small chunks of JSON, and then use code to combine all of those into one big graph. But um, again, the graph, I'm only using one prompt, which is pretty stupid, I guess, because um, one thing I really wanted it to do, and I think I still want it to do that, but that gets to the question of why I'm making these graphs and what I intend to do with them, which I haven't really haven't yet gotten to. but it's like is to create the services. I really wanted there to be service objects, and I wanted there to be person objects. I felt like those were sort of like, I mean, when you do the scrapes, it automatically comes up with like web page objects. Um, it automatically comes up with like image objects, just like a representation of the website will be on there. But I feel like the value is pulling out the services offered, the offers, the prices, and especially getting into the UCP. This sort of thing is even more important. Um, the same as stuff, I guess. I don't know. I really have to think through the why I'm making these graphs better. Um, but anyways, the point is that like there should probably be like one API call that just establishes the services, and then another API call that establishes the persons, and then another like it should be split up like that instead of being split up like, well, here's the WordPress chunk, and now here's the HTML chunk, and now here's the chunk that was based on what they already had, the JSON schema that they already had on there. All right, I'm gonna get back to the question of why, but I feel like I skipped over something here, which was like, wasn't I looking at? Okay, what is this? What are we looking at here? This is the WordPress. Yeah, so it's skipping over a whole bunch of content that it shouldn't skip over, and then a lot of the content seems to have short code in it. So I'm not sure why it has short code in it, whether that's what I ultimately gets sent. And then this clearly, this is supposed to be all the content, but clearly what we find here is that it's a very small, what we got out of this was a very small amount. Which by the way, that's kind of the other thing is that I really want to like just compare what I get from each of the three scrapers. The HTML scraper, basically there's the WordPress scraper, there's the HTML scraper, and there's the JSON scraper. You know, basically that's what it breaks down to. There's the scraper that scrapes for the schema that's already on there, then the one that uses the JSON, the WordPress API, and then the one that just looks for, that just gets the HTML, gets the URLs, goes to each one individually, gets the HTML. So there's three different types of scrapers. Um, what was my point? So for these three scrapers, I want to compare and contrast these the three graphs that are coming out of them. So this right here is the graph that came out of the WordPress scraper. Now here is the graph that came out of the HTML scraper, which clearly there's just a lot more to it. It's just longer. So basically this did a better job, even though, again, do I have the restaurant scraper open? I don't think I do. Even though it wasn't actually, it didn't actually find the URLs and then scrape those URLs individually. It just guessed at like the domain slash services and like five different variations of services. So this, especially considering that this might be, all right, let's just do all of them and see if I Probably can't do what I'm trying to do right now. Yes, indeed, I cannot do what I'm trying to do right now. All right, well, that will fix that problem. And what do we get? This is the restaurant scraper. So you see it does do an effective job of getting the URLs, but then it gets blocked because it's trying to scrape all of them at the same time. So I really need to combine the restaurant scraper with the about what I've been calling the about contact services, so that what it does is it grabs the URLs and then it just scrapes the URLs that are listed on the homepage. Oh, there's also a file called get socials, which is meant to just get, I think it's basically just meant to search for the word LinkedIn in their footer. And then if there's a URL associated with that, to grab that and put it in the JSON object. And it doesn't work very well. It worked like 40% of the time. So that was good enough for me. But okay, I fixed this. So this should actually do something now. I really shouldn't wait for it though, because it's very slow. So I'm flipping back and forth between the structure of the things, there it is, and then the question of why I'm even doing this. Okay, so here we have the word. Okay, so we've got the WordPress scraper. We've got the scraper. We have URL scraper. So as we can see, the one that has the most information is the JSON scraper, and this is not. Um, so all this is doing is scraping and combining all the JSON that already exists on their website, which is great. And the more if they have good stuff on their website, and honestly, I kind of feel like I want to start with this more and only use the other ones when I need to use them. Um, because it's like this doesn't even I didn't even make an API call. It's purely just like, okay, whatever's on your website, I'm going to put it into one graph, and now I can use that for whatever I'm going to use it for. However, it's very much a reflection of the website itself, as opposed to pulling the information out of the website and giving it more context, and it doesn't add any value. So that's kind of like you wouldn't want to just have this because it's first of all, again, we're not trying to recreate the JSON version of the website. We're trying to create a JSON representation of the organization using the website. Uh, and and we definitely want to know, like, who are your employees and what services you offer and how much those services cost. Um, So, uh, right. So because we want to add some value and we want to restructure it in such a way that it's um, representing the organization more than it represents the website. So then we want to, use no, we want to use this WordPress, get the WordPress content, and here we go. Now in this one we have some people, for example, that we didn't have previously. We got some information that we didn't have previously. Do we have a same as section? I don't know. Okay. But then for some of them, even whether they either are not using WordPress or their WordPress is like the API is blocked, for example, HTML scraper. And it is going to give us all of this, which I think possibly is this the first one where we have that calendar listed? Let's see here. You know what? I think I'm looking up different. I'm comparing the results from different URLs here. Yeah, one of them is Sharp Rocket, and then this one is SEO specialist. Let me just make sure. Are they all? Are this is this one Sharp Rocket? This one is Sharp Rocket. This one is Sharp Rocket. Okay, so it's only the last one. So I'll rerun that one with. Pretty sure in my attempts to open the file, I just closed the file. Son of a bitch. Okay. So let's go ahead and rerun this one time with the correct URL in there so that we're comparing apples to apples. Speaking of which, food would be amazing. I don't actually think I'm like close to figuring anything out here. I'm just wrapping my head around here, around it. But that's kind of, so we've got the functions which is really mostly about the combiner, but there's other functions in there that are relevant. Um, there's the way that each of these files are called and like how they're strung together. What I've been referring to as the framework. Then there's the thing that gets all the JSON. There's basically the JSON scraper, the WordPress scraper, and the HTML scraper. Um, and then again, the combiner. After all the scraping has been done, then there's the combiner, and then there's the saving of the JSON graph to the server, and then there's the adding of the graph to the vector database. These are all the moving parts. Oh, and the prompt which creates the graphs for all of them, except for the JSON scraper, which doesn't use the prompt at all. It simply scrapes all the JSON and then combines that into one graph. Is this finished here? No. There we go. All right. So again, so we have one website, one organization, 114 image objects, 142 breadcrumbs, 143 web pages. Look at all the persons. Then Chito, Joseph. So this is, I mean, I think this is post combining them because that's we got a service. So I mean, so two things. Like first, we get the most information out of the JSON scraper most of the time. Depends actually. Some websites you get none because they just don't have schema on their website. Uh, but these guys have good schema on their website. It's an SEO company, so they should if they're up to date with things. Um, and so we're getting a lot of info. But the question is still like, is it formatted the way we want? Have we added any value here? Is there certain info that is on the website, but it didn't manage to make it into their schema and therefore it's not in this schema? And then is there stuff on here that we don't really like? Do we really need all 154 web pages on here? 143? Are there more than three services? Um, and like the same as, there's only one same as. That seems to be, there's definitely should be more. I think the only thing, again, so I think the reason I pulled this up was because I was trying to determine whether or not it says that the founder, who the founder is. Because if we look back at the other one, the WordPress one, I think, no, the HTML, I think it says that the founder is this Vencito, right? And I know that this one here, the one that combines the JSON from their website, it has his name on there, but does it actually list him as the founder? I'm not seeing that it does. So there's certain things that we maybe are going to want to be able to scrape from the WordPress or from the HTML that didn't come out when we just scraped their JSON. And then there's certain websites that just straight up don't have any JSON, so we have to like create it from scratch for them. And then there is probably a reason why we would want to run the whole result through AI one way or another and have it just evaluate and determine whether or not there's anything else that should be added to here. Um, and we want to just have this process like available to us basically. uh, and maybe we want more than one prompt that accomplishes that. So those are all the moving pieces. Did I cover all of the moving pieces? I feel like I covered all of the moving pieces there. So that's the architecture. Honestly, I could just start over from the scratch and just using this architecture and build something new. And honestly, it would probably end up being better. Um, and also, I kind of want to just start over with like just using the scraped JSON and only do something, add something else into it when I know why, because that brings why. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to take a little stab at talking about why I'm doing this. Um, And okay, so there's the thing is, it's not that like I don't have any reason at all, but there's like multiple different reasons that are floating around in my head, and each of them uh, would imply that like the process should be automated in a different manner, and I'm like swapping back and forth between which one, and maybe there is like a nexus. But okay, so for one, the browser bots, the browser bots can use a graph like this, and then I don't even need to like if it has the URLs, uh, I don't need to connect it to the WordPress in the event that it has URLs like this. There we go. Because if the browser bot just has this graph, right, URL, and then when you say I want to look at the off, when you click the button for off-page services Philippines, well, first of all, it populates the chat with a button for each of these web pages, and then when you click the button, it'll just go to this URL and grab the content and put it into the chat. Okay, anyway, so that's the browser bot. That's one option. Or that's it's one of the things floating around in my head as to why I'm doing these things. Then is the knowledge bot. Now the knowledge bot is like this graph or the combination of the JSON scraper, the WordPress scraper, and the HTML scraper all combined into one graph. That graph is everything that the knowledge bot knows about the company. And 100% of the information that it's going to use to answer your questions is going to come from that graph. Okay. So there's the knowledge bot. Now there's the directory. And I think this is actually the answer that I'm looking for here. This is truly, I'm a fucking idiot. This is clearly the answer right now. For the time being, this is the answer, is the directory. That all I care about is that this graph is something that I can upload into a vector database and it will suffice as the directory entry for this organization. And as long as these files are set up in such a way that the graph resulting from their use is good enough for a directory entry, that means that the only thing stopping me from creating a directory is um, a list of companies. Like I should be able to give it like a list of 100 whatevers, 100 real estate agents, 100 breakfast shops, 100 7-Elevens, 100 SEO agencies. And um, and then it will just have a directory of each of these. But a couple of things. One, well, there needs to be a way to like easily change the vector database it's going into. Two, there needs to be maybe an automated email when they get added to the directory. Three, there needs to be a way to show who is in the directory. It can't be like entirely like it's a black box. You need to know, like, that doesn't make any sense. There should be like a blog post for each directory entry. So I have no clue how that would really work. Anyways, that's definitely the way to go though. That's definitely like the idea that I have in mind here is that like it creates a directory. Now, all the ways in which that is not a good thing, like that's in and of itself is not enough, are like is the next series of problems that I need to deal with. But the why I'm doing this needs to be it's for a directory. It's not necessarily for a demo. The demos I can make separately. That said, the whole idea that I can use a directory chatbot and it can pull up demo chatbots to me is very cool and possibly the key, possibly a necessity. Um, but yeah, the directory. Oh, and then the other thing, the big thing with directories has always been the big issue with directories is that um, if you want to make a change to one item in the directory, it's a huge pain in the ass. And the way to deal with that is to sync the vector database and the directory. Anyways, I'm pretty sure if I just make like 10 different directories, then all of these issues will be dealt with one way or another. Okay, but I feel like there were some other options as to the why I'm doing this, and I wanted to go through them, even though I'm pretty sure that the directory creation is the way forward. In this moment, creating directories. The point of creating the graphs is to create the directories. And the point of creating directories is there is no point in creating directories. It's just so that when I go to create a directory, it's not a 6-month process. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm working on this one item at a time. I literally just have to build the list, and then I can automate the building of the list too. But once the list is built, the actual creation of the directory, at least the rough draft of the directory, can be totally automated. That's the goal. That's what we're aiming for. Okay. But there are some other reasons possibly as to why I'm doing this that I just wanted to review to make sure there's nothing else there. So we had the browser bots, yes, that can use a graph, the knowledge bot that can use a graph. GEO, like it's for one thing is like the resulting JSON. For some of these people, I could offer them this JSON object. Like, hey, this is better than what you have on your website. You should update your website with this. Um, I don't know. It could do. There's all sorts of potential ways that it could like do an automated analysis of the company, determine whether they're like a good prospect for me, maybe like automatically pull the email out of the company and send them an email. Uh, there's a million different things that it you could use the graph for potentially. I guess then, and just an audit, just being like, hey, this is what, like, I audited your schema, and this is what I came up with, is a good thing there. I guess if everything's in the directory, it's sort of like you can ask the directory like very detailed information, and it will be able to pull it out of all of the different entries. Oh, like, yeah, I can just like do an evaluation of like the business itself, do an evaluation of like the site structure or the blog posts. It could theoretically be usable for the blogging chatbot, in terms of like using this information to inform the blog posts that it is writing. The main one is just their SEO, which I just said their GEO. I don't know if I mean to make a distinction or not, but there must be a way to use this to like improve their SEO. Uh, there absolutely must be. Like, just must be a way that we can use this graph to provide value added analysis of the company itself. And the thing, like with the directory, for example, it's like, okay, well, if this graph has like a same as for their Facebook and a same as for their Instagram and their YouTube, then when you pull that up on the directory, it's not necessarily going to list the URL. It's going to actually embed their YouTube profile and embed their Facebook feed. Um, so that's glorious. But let me think about this. Is there other bots that I have? What all bots do I have? The knowledge bot, the browser bot, the knowledge bot, browser bot, feed bot, post bot. Well, one thing is that these graphs are not actually including the blog at all, or the blog posts. So I don't know. There might be some value in creating a graph representation of their blog. I should maybe mess around with that a little bit and just see what comes out of it. Um, what else we got? I mean, yeah, like this gets into the UCP, but like, what products do they offer? Do the products that they offer have enough information that we can give this graph to a chatbot, and then the chatbot will be able to like give you relevant information about the products, as opposed like give you like a like an embedded product with a price and like an option to buy sort of thing. Okay, so we got like one more time: browser bots, knowledge bots, um, feed bots. I could honestly just look at literally any of the demos that I've made and tell you the answer to this here question here. But and one other thing I guess is like with the knowledge bot and the idea of making the knowledge bot into a bot that actually does sales. This could be a thing. The graph could be. It could be that the graph should provide enough information to turn the knowledge bot into a sales bot. But I think, just having it be like a schema auditor, schema evaluator, schema, what's the word I'm looking for? Enhancer. That alone is already like a useful tool. All right, browser bot, review bot. Oh, the review bot. Yeah, it could be useful for the review bot if the review bot had access to this graph. Um, it could potentially use the information in the graph to set the questions that it asks, to set the keywords that it uses. Yep. And honestly, if the graph has the places ID, or yeah, if the graph would grab the places ID, then that would make the creation of the review bot easier. But I feel like almost no companies have their places ID listed on their website anywhere, even like in the schema. Um, yes, okay, and that's the coming back to the thing I always forget about, and I always is that um, the big wild card is like how much information from their Google reviews do we want to embed in this graph, and how much information do we want to turn into FAQs and put in the graph? Because if you take a lot of it, first of all, ChatGPT doesn't have access to the Google reviews. So if you were to embed Google reviews into this graph and then have the graph on your website, that would give ChatGPT access to your Google reviews. But secondly, a lot of information that could be turned into FAQs could is contained is within the reviews. So we can augment this graph with information from the reviews. But even beside from that, just based on the content of the website, there's absolutely 100% chance that there are FAQs that could be created from the content. And you could take those FAQs by just by giving the content to ChatGPT, to the OpenAI API, and saying create FAQs from this content, and then taking the FAQs and putting them into the JSON format and adding them to the graph. So that's going to make the knowledge bot better. It's going to make their directory entry more informative. If you're asking questions to the directory bot and be able to give you direct answers about the specific entity, um, and it could create a FAQ bot, which is the knowledge bot, but whatever. Um, I guess what I mean to say is that theoretically, if this graph can just be attached to the manifest, and then we can just not even have a knowledge bot. We just have the the main bot, which happens to know all of this information about the company, but it also knows that if you would like to leave a review, there's a special bot for that, and it can switch you to that bot. That if you would like to make a blog post, there's a special blog for that. If you'd like to read the blog, there's a special blog for that, and it can um, yeah, and then if you'd like to, what's the other option here? Leave a review. If you'd like to look at the website, there's a special blog for that. Although, again, there's a special bot for that. If the graph includes all of the web page URLs, then perhaps that is unnecessary to actually switch bots. You can just stay on the main bot, like this one right here. You know, instead of having to click website browser, you just tell it, and then what we get is an answer. It uses the information from the graph. But if part of the information from the graph is a URL, then it just goes to that URL and grabs that information and includes that in the answer. And again, it could do the same with the blog. I don't know. I really have been struggling with that one for a while because, on one hand, I really want to do that, and it just seems like it would be very useful to like do that to do the thing where it's like every time you give it a prompt, it answers from the knowledge bot, the blog bot, and the website bot all at the same time. There's three different API calls that are made using multi-curl, so they're made simultaneously. It grabs the information from the graph, it grabs the information from the website, it grabs the information from the blog, and then it just gives you an answer, which is the best each. There's three parts to the answer, a chunk from each. Um, but I just keep hesitating to actually go do that because um, it just seems like messing with demos is not useful because nobody ever uses the demos. So it doesn't matter how fucking amazing the demos are. But I don't know. It does kind of seem like there's something there. And if I were to play around with that and know that that's an option, that I would be able to incorporate that into my planning and maybe make it so that the like almost all of the functionality uh, for any particular bot can be accessed through the directory bot without even having to switch bots or even having to embed a demo inside of the directory. It's just like it's all there just because like the directory bot has access to this graph, but it also has access to hundreds of other companies' graphs. And therefore, to create a new demo for a new company, I just have to add them to the directory. And once they are added to the directory, that is in and of itself a demo. Like you just have to look their name up, and then it will automatically be the demo without having to separately create a demo that it then embeds. It just is. All right. Anyways, I feel like I got off. I was talking about FAQs and reviews. Yeah. So, right. But that is something you could do is to take the content for all of these three scrapers that I have. You know what? And here's this is an important point that I had completely forgotten about is that I tried to do this before and I deleted it because it sucked. The output sucked so bad. But um, I tried to have the OpenAI API call create FAQs, and the FAQs were just garbage. And when I tried to make the FAQs better, it did make them better, but it made the rest of the graph worse. So what I really need to do is like separate out that API call, have one API call that does nothing but create FAQs, and so possibly that's three API calls. So one for the HTML content, one for the WordPress content, and one for the graph content, where it just takes the content and turns it into an FAQ. And then the final knowledge graph uh, has three sets of FAQ questions that it combines together. And then that is the graph which goes into the vector database as the directory entry for this company. I totally forgot that so really what I need to do is just play around with creating FAQs out of HTML content, out of text content, and out of JSON objects, and then figure out how to do that. So my takeaways here, there's a lot to do with all these little files. Um, there's a lot of optimizations that can be made, but I think the most important points here are I'm making these graphs so that they can be a directory entry. So in terms of what is included and what is not included and how much tokens I'm willing to spend, how many API calls there are, all of that, it should all be determined for the time being based on what makes it a good enough directory entry. And then Two is that I should have OpenAI API calls that do nothing but create FAQs from the content, which is then added to the graph, which is then which is the directory entry. And three, again, I should just set up that multi-curl, if I just get even if I just make it so that it's asking the blog bot any of the and the knowledge bot at the same time, any two of them, just getting one proof of concept as far as that goes, then it's once I got that, then I basically have the three responses together, and then I have that in my back pocket as an option that I can do at any time. Okay, great. And then as far as the directory entries go, it's like the point is to ultimately totally automate the entire process of creating a new directory and to be able to create, a new directory every single day with that, like with 100 companies, you know, or that like literally all I have to do is type in, say like, uh, SEO companies in the Philippines, and it's just like check back in 5 hours, and there's a full directory built of SEO companies in the Philippines. Uh, you know, and what I mean by directory is like a directory chatbot based on these graphs. And yeah, I don't know. Possibly automated emails, possibly like a website, possibly like a blog post for each entry, that sort of thing. But whatever, I'm being very repetitive now. I'm repeating myself again and again. Uh, so I think there's nothing to do but get to work on those items and just build the directories, build the FAQs, and try the multi-curl, and probably continue to eat junk food. I really need more junk food in my life. That's high priority right now.